It's Wednesday here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter is joined by Ray Fittipaldo. We're going to be talking what Art Rooney said at the owners' meetings about Aaron Rodgers. We'll also go over Ray's newest 7-round mock for the Steelers. Who does he have them taking at the different stages of the draft? And looking at those NFL rule changes, what did pass, what didn't pass, all here in the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello, welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Ray Fittipaldo. And as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in an accident and you need help, or if you need help with workers' compensation, Edgar Snyder Associates is the place you need to call at 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Ray, let's talk about what Art Rooney says, because he chimed in. We've heard everyone been chiming in about Aaron Rodgers, but the man himself, Art Rooney, says, what was his reaction when our guys got to ask him what the Steelers' stance on the weight for Aaron Rodgers is?
Yeah, so Mike Tomlin, first off, earlier in the week said, I don't really have a timeline or a deadline, but team president Art Rooney says, we're going to wait a little while longer, but we're not going to wait forever. So I think, Chris, I think it's important to point out he's really the first person in the Steelers organization who was a little bit firm on it. I mean, he basically said, Aaron, we want you to be quarterback here, but we're not going to sit here and wait forever. I still don't know a timeline, Chris, but I think by Art saying that, I think this would have to wrap up before the draft, right? I mean, just so the Steelers can have all their ducks in a row there in terms of how they want to approach the draft. I would think that would be the deadline Art is thinking of. But like I said, he was the first person to mention a soft deadline. So I think that's important to point out, in this long and drawn out saga.
What do we think that deadline is? Like he's saying it's a little while longer. Like a little while longer to me does not mean this week or next week or even the week after that. It might mean the end of the month. It might mean OTAs. It might mean minicamp. Like I don't know what that means, and I think that's what every Steelers fan out there is wanting to know. Like, hey, if you're signing us up for Aaron Rodgers, when do we know that this charade is over with, or this not the charade, but this saga is over with, because everyone's just waiting for the shoe to drop at this point.
I think even though OTAs are voluntary, Chris, I think it's important for a new quarterback coming into a new offense with a new offensive coordinator, new players around him. I think it's important for him to be there. And even if it's not, let's say Aaron Rodgers, there's 10 OTAs. Let's say Aaron Rodgers only shows up to 2. Chris, it would still be okay if he took his receivers on weekends and they worked out at the beach somewhere, whether that was before OTAs or after OTAs. I think as long as those guys are on the same page and they're all learning this offense together, I think that's okay. What you don't want to do is you don't want to have this drawn out to the point where Aaron Rodgers is coming in here, doesn't have a great feel for Arthur Smith, doesn't have a great feel for his receivers. That's exactly what you want to avoid, because I think we've said it on the show before. This is a one-shot deal for Aaron Rodgers at the end of his career. It's a one-shot deal for the Steelers. You got to make it work, and the best way to make that work is to work well together and, for everyone to be on the same page.
Yeah, I think it's the same page thing. And it makes me wonder if there is a handshake agreement right now with the Steelers. But I think there's some people out there, Ray, that are still thinking, is Aaron Rodgers holding this out so that he can get something else, so that he can get the Vikings to agree to him? Are the Steelers just his backup plan for this master plan that he has for another team out there? And I think with every day that he does not just agree to a deal with the Steelers, I think it continues. That question gets louder and louder. But here's my other thing about that, Ray. it's not like the Steelers are going to be bent out of shape if he just doesn't choose them, because again, they've only made him one offer. They haven't upped the offer. They haven't redone the offer. They didn't invite him to their facility. He invited himself. Like, it seems like just the Steelers are like, hey, you know what? You come, you good for you. We're happy for you to be here. You don't come, good for you. Do your thing. We'll be happy for you somewhere else. We will work with Mason Rudolph or whoever is the quarterback this season. But to me, Ray, like, I look at this situation right now, and I just continue to think, like, yeah, sure, Aaron Rodgers could be holding on to something, a different chance somewhere else, but I don't think it, even if he is doing that, even if that is what he's doing, I don't think it's going to destroy or stop the Steelers from trying to build what they absolutely want to build, which is being a better team and getting ready to draft a real quarterback, for a real franchise quarterback in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, big picture wise, I agree with you. I think it's clear that Justin Fields was their first option. Aaron Rodgers was their second option. If that doesn't happen for some reason, and I still think it is, but if that doesn't happen for some reason, Chris, whether the Steelers are comfortable with it or not, the optics are not going to be good, and they're going to be looked upon by a lot of the people in this city and a lot of people across the country as a laughingstock for having butchered this. Whether it's true or not, those are going to be the optics. So you might be right. They might be very willing to go into the season with Mason Rudolph. Last year they had the cheapest quarterback in the NFL with Russ playing for $1.1 million. I would venture to say that Mason would be the cheapest option again, making $4 million in 2025. So that is definitely a scenario that could come to fruition, but I don't think that's what the Steelers want to happen.
No, I agree, Ray. Obviously, they want him because that's why they're offering it to him. If they were just happy with Mason and they just thought he was the guy, he's QB1 no matter what, they wouldn't be offering Rodgers. They'd be just like, hey, they'd be heralding Mason as that, but they know he's not that. That's why, his entire time with the Steelers, he was a backup. They knew that about him, and he went to test out, hey, can I be a starter? He went to go see what the Titans, with their shaky quarterback situation. He got his chance to start. They wanted to see what he had. And he did even worse than he did with the Steelers. So then he was like, hey, you know what? I am a backup quarterback. Let me come back to the place that understood that about me and gave me the chance to shine in some better spots and also likes me. So now he's back for that. And I think that's where Mike Tomlin, whenever you hear Mike Tomlin say, oh, we're fine with Mason Rudolph, it's because they know that Mason Rudolph and the Steelers locker room, they can get along. Not only can they get along, they can find ways to win with that guy. They've done that. So it'd be more of a settling situation, but they're settling for Rodgers in the first place because they know that this is not the year to get crazy and get aggressive to go after a quarterback. Now, who knows? Maybe Ray, maybe they pulled the wool over our eyes and really maybe they are going for Jackson Dart. Maybe they are picking one of those guys in the first round and they think this is the new franchise quarterback. But everything that I've seen, everything that you've seen, I think that we've talked about this a lot. That is not the case when we just start to add up the context clues.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to, let's do some predictions. My prediction, Chris, Aaron Rodgers will sign before the draft. The Steelers will take a quarterback in the third or fourth round, and everything is still set up for them to get their franchise player next year.
I'm right with you there. I think a lot of people have a prediction that Aaron Rodgers is waiting until the Pat McAfee show comes on April 9th to PPG Paints Arena. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's literally that's a week from today. So who knows? Maybe when we do this show next Wednesday morning, that'll be the last time we have to do a show wondering if Aaron Rodgers will sign a deal with the Steelers. But it does seem imminent to me, at least when we hear all these things, because of how things are playing out. But even if it's not, even if something changes in the last hour, clearly the Steelers have other plans. But again, that's not the big story of the year. It's going to be about building this team moving forward. And I want to talk about how Ray sees them building with his latest mock draft in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'll ask him about his picks, go over the options there, and talk about that next year on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, we'll remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. They also do workers' compensation. When you've been hurt on the job, do you know who decides when you're better? Do you know who decides when your treatment's over? And do you know who decides when your benefits are over? The answer might surprise you. The insurance companies, doctors do. How does that make you feel? If the answer is not great, you need to call Edgar Snyder Associates today at 1-800-94-EDGAR because they'll fight for the workers' comp rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's go over your latest 7-round mock in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can read it at post-gazette.com. I think that we found a lot of theme that we've been talking about is defensive line is a priority early for this team, and you continue to emphasize that with your latest mock draft. Break down who your first-round pick was for the Steelers and why you went this direction.
Yeah, so we're still talking about a defensive lineman, this time Kenneth Grant, but that was after I picked Derek Harmon, the defensive end out of Oregon in my previous mock draft. So I'm still on the D-line train, and I think unless there's a Tyler Warren who falls to them or an Ashton Genty that falls to them, and I think both of those scenarios are unlikely. I cannot see them going any other direction than defensive line. Now, until Rodgers signs, I suppose you have to keep the door open for a quarterback. But like you said last segment, Chris, I still don't think that's going to happen. I think Shedeur Sanders will be gone, and I think it would be a reach to take Jackson Dart at number 21. So still on the D-line train. I really like Kenneth Grant. I really like Derek Harmon too. I think either of those guys would be good choices for the Steelers.
I think there's one trait that both of them have that I think is very interesting. I think Derek Harmon, I think Kenneth Grant has this a little bit more right now, but I think both of these guys have shown the abilities to handle double teams well. And that, to me, is a key element of what the Steelers need at defensive tackle. You go back and look at that Ravens playoff game and the second Ravens game. So many times the run game was going because right up the middle, the Steelers, when Keanu Benton or Larry Ogunjobi got double teamed, they couldn't counter it. Now, Cam Hayward, he could anchor it down and he can make it harder on teams, but you can't have that be the only guy that can take on a double team. You need to have multiple guys doing that. And Keanu Benton didn't do a great job. He did other things well, but taking on double teams did not look like to be his forte. So Kenneth Grant, to me, I think he is the best guy in this draft class at taking on double teams. Just the way that he is physical, he's big, he's quick, he's aggressive, he knows how to use his hands and his leverage to control the point of attack, even when he's being double teamed. Even if he doesn't make the play, he makes it so the linebackers behind him can make the play. And that, to me, is the big key there. That's what Casey Hampton did so well for so many years. And I know that people are going to say, well, you don't need a nose as much in today's NFL. Well, Steelers certainly did when they were getting just run over by the Ravens. And that's why, again, I think you want to have a DT that can both do that and rush the passer. I think Derek Harmon right now is the better pass rusher than Grant, but Grant may be the better double team guy, but both of them, I think, can do both very well.
Yeah, and I think it's important, the NFL saying now is, and Mike Tomlin repeats this all the time, you don't use a first-round pick on a guy who's going to be a two-down specialist for you. You just don't. He basically said that again at the owners' meetings. But Kenneth Grant can bump out and play three technique. I've even seen him in some formations at Michigan bump out and play on the tackle. So, I mean, he's done it all, at Michigan. But you would have to think, with the Steelers, be real easy for them to bump out Keanu Benton, who is smaller, bump him out to three technique. He's a replacement for Larry Ogunjobi. Then you got Kenneth Grant as a rookie. Kenneth, you're going to be our nose. You're going to be our run stopper. If you can prove to us that you deserve to be in there in some packages, you'll be in there. We will use you, but your first job is to make us a better run defense. And I think that would be a very smart pick for the Steelers.
I think it would too. Let's move to your next pick here. You have the Steelers in the third round going quarterback. That's where you go quarterback. You get Tyler Shough out of Louisville. Tyler Shough is a very people are hot or cold on this guy because he's 26 years old. He ran well at the combine. He has a lot of injuries histories, but he's very experienced, and he does have NFL traits going for him. And I think the thing that people said that Kenny Pickett had is that he's NFL ready. He's the most NFL ready because he can think at that level. I think that is something that Tyler Shough actually does have in his favor. The question will be, is it enough to make him that kind of a threat, a prospect at quarterback that you want to take him this early? Why'd you take him in the third round? Yeah,
so people say don't take a quarterback before the fourth round. But Chris, quarterbacks are always pushed up a round or so. It's just it's a fact of life, and you have to go into these mock drafts with realistic scenario. So I'm not saying they couldn't get a quarterback in the fourth round, but if you want to get a guy like Shough I think you probably have to get him earlier than that. And I think with him, it's interesting. The age doesn't really concern me. It just doesn't. I mean, these quarterbacks, if you're good, you're playing until your late 30s. He could have a 10 or 12-year career. I mean, if he's the guy, he could be a franchise guy for a decade. And if he's not, if he turns out to be a good backup, then that's a third-round pick isn't crazy for that either.
Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, exactly. You need those guys. So I think the age is not concerning for me. The injury history is. Like that's the one red flag for me. It wasn't just 1 year; it was multiple years. You would really have to. And he visited the Steelers in March. You really have to trust your doctors on this one. Say, hey, this is healed. We think he could have a long career. Those types of things are going to have to be settled behind the scenes. We don't know how the Steelers truly feel about his health, but if he was in here for a visit, you better know that he was given the once-over by doctors. And if they are comfortable with him, I think there's a decent chance that they could take him if he's there in the third round.
Let's move on to your other picks, getting to day 3 here in the 4th round. You have them taking Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State running back. Break down what you see about him other than just he goes to the same school that Jaylen Warren went to.
Yeah, so listen, you got Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell right now on your roster, 2 diminutive backs who bring certain things to the offense, but I don't think short yardage and goal line situations are going to be their forte. So Ollie Gordon is a big guy. Didn't run great at the combine, but for a guy his size, I think he's 220-ish. You're in a 4.61. So, he's a guy who could be a workhorse for you if you want him to be that. He's also really good catching the ball out of the backfield. He didn't necessarily show that a lot this year, but he's really good with his hands. He can do that. And, he could be used in all situations. So I think Jaylen Warren's going to be given the chance to start early in the season, but I can see a very real scenario unfolding where a guy like Gordon or somebody else comes in, he gets the bulk of the first and second down carries, and then Jaylen Warren is back to where he was, with Najee Harris.
In the 5th round, you have them going after another defensive lineman, C.J. West out of Indiana. Now, oftentimes when you look at depth defensive linemen, you try to get a special trait that can work with you in the long term. Is this guy more of a pass rusher, or is he more of a run stuffer that could work out in the depth of the Steelers' defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's potential there as a pass rusher, but Chris, I mean, if you're an excellent pass rusher, you're going to be very coveted in the draft. And I think he's more of a mid-round pick, 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Transfer out of Kent State, played 1 year at Indiana. He tested really well at the combine too. So, those traits could be there for him to develop into more of a pass rusher in the NFL, but he would be a guy that you could slide in to the rotation 3 technique. That's what he played at Indiana. And I think you could sub him in there, and he'd be a pretty good depth player in your defensive line rotation.
You also add a speedy receiver in Chimere, Dike out of Florida. Whenever I look at wide receivers late in the draft, I always look for something that they do particularly well. Are they a speedster? Are they a route runner? Or are they a go up and get it guy? And this guy is a speedster. Talk about why you wanted him in the 6th round.
Yeah, listen, when you're going to get a receiver in the 6th round, he's probably going to be a special teamer. This guy did that at Florida. He can come in and be a gunner for you. And then also, if you're, preparing for down the road when George Pickens is not going to be on the roster, he could be another speed threat on the outside that you could pair with DK Metcalf. So that's, sort of the thinking there. I think they already have some decent options inside. Like, I think you could certainly upgrade over Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin as your inside receivers, but they're on the roster. They're going to be on the roster for 2025. And in Roman Wilson's case, he'll be here for 2 more years after that. So they kind of have the small guys. I think planning for life without George Pickens, you might want to get another big and fast guy on the outside so DK Metcalf wouldn't get doubled as often.
Absolutely. And then you round out with a swing tackle, offensive tackle, Jack Nelson out of Wisconsin. I also think I agree with you. that's a need to try to see if you can get that late in the draft, because you can always use an extra offensive tackle. They need tackle depth. That's something that they're not sure that they'll have this year behind Fautanu and Broderick Jones.
Yeah, and listen, Dylan Cook could be that guy. They like Dylan Cook. He's been on the team for a couple of years now, bouncing between the active roster and the practice squad. But you do need competition. Listen, Dylan Cook was injured last year. So I think he could be the guy, but you definitely want to bring in somebody who could push him and maybe be that guy for the future as well.
Absolutely. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to Ray about some of those rule changes, the rule changes that did happen and the rule changes that didn't happen in NFL owners meetings. We'll discuss that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by UFC Gym Pittsburgh. Are you ready to train like a champion? UFC Gym has everything for total body health under one roof. They have group classes from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Zumba, personal training, cardio, weights, cryotherapy, infrared saunas, and more, all for an unbeatable price. Not sure where to begin? All members get a starter session with an expert coach to help map out your fitness plan. Your first visit is on us. Drop in with free parking at Market Square or the waterfront and follow UFC Gym Pittsburgh on social media. Train different, feel unstoppable at UFC Gym. We're also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They're your mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, I want to talk to you about some of these the rule changes that did happen. We'll get to the ones that didn't happen because the tush push is the big thing there. But let's start with what did happen. I think this could be interesting. The NFL is going to involve like an advanced camera system for how they spot the ball and how they mark that. That could revolutionize how spotting happens. And I do wonder if it'll be a net positive for the NFL, because I feel like they've needed something like this. I thought it should be more of like a chip-based thing or a laser-based thing where you don't need to bring out the chains to measure if they got the first down. Because the ball did or did not cross that plane while it was in the possession of the player.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL had to do this, Chris. I mean, you have to embrace the technology if it's out there. I suppose we're not going to have Gene Steratore pulling out the index card and trying to put it between the last link on the chain to try to determine if you got a first down or not. So, we won't have those funny types of instances anymore. Like I said, the technology is good. You have it. You can trust it. You got to use it.
I agree with you there. They also made the kickoff rule permanent. They're going to move it so that if you get a touchback, it is now the 35-yard line to further encourage kickoff returns in the NFL. Ray, they've been trying to make the kickoff more and more relevant with it seems like every year. Is this a mistake in your part, or do you think that this makes sense and it could actually open some more things up in the NFL?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Chris, I wouldn't be upset if the kickoff just went away and you placed the ball in the 30 or 35.
Yeah, there you go.
Kind of over that play, but from the Steelers' perspective, this is the new rule now. Chris, they were last in the NFL in kickoff return average last season. I mean, if you remember, almost a year ago to the date, they passed the rule that they were going to have this new dynamic kickoff. And hours later, they went out and signed Cordero Patterson. They said, hey, we got one of the NFL's all-time best kickoff returners. We're going to sign him, and we're going to make this work for us. Well, it didn't work. And whether that was because of Patterson's age, he just got slower, or they didn't have they didn't figure out the personnel and the blocking schemes. I mean, that's probably all part of it. But, the Steelers thought they were smarter than everyone else last year, and they didn't get the results that they certainly wanted. So now teams are going to have even more incentive to put the ball in play. Putting the ball from the 30 to the 35 it's a fairly big deal. There's a reason they're doing that. Steelers got to get better at it. I mean, I don't know how Patterson fits into it, but Kenneth Gainwell did it with the Eagles. Jaylen Warren did it for the Steelers last year. Jaylen Warren had as many returns or maybe more returns than Patterson. I think he had a 25.3 average. Patterson had a 21.8 average. It's a big difference. It's a big difference.
That is a big difference. And then I think the last change was just making the overtime rules for the playoffs also matter in the regular season, so that a touchdown doesn't just win. The touchdown in overtime doesn't just end the game. Each team does get a chance to have the ball. But let's talk about the big news. People were upset that certain things didn't pass. There were teams that were pushing to get rid of the tush push, and I think if I read this correctly, the Steelers were one of the teams that were okay with banning the tush push. It didn't pass. It didn't have enough support around the NFL. But what did you see? Do you think the tush push is eventually going to be outlawed, or do you think that this is just a football play and people need to get used to it?
Well, not this year, because Chris, when any time something is tabled from the owners meetings until there's one more owners meetings in May before the season starts. Anytime it's tabled, it's 99% sure it's not going to be, the rule's not going to change this year. So from my perspective, yeah, the Steelers wanted to get rid of it, but now you got to pivot and you got to find ways to exploit that rule. I mean, the Eagles have done it. They practice it. They work hard at it. If you look at the Steelers, I thought they were negligent last year. You had Justin Fields as your backup quarterback. And did they try to tush push even once?
I don't think they did.
They tried. I know they tried some read options, varying amounts of success. Certainly not success when you needed it against the Browns. Like, to me, like what is stopping them? It's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, they'll find. Let's say they draft Jalen Milroe in the 3rd or 4th round. Jalen Milroe, you come in on 3rd and 2 or 4th and 1, 4th and 2. We're going to have Darnell Washington come in motion, and we're going to have his 300-pound butt push you forward. I mean, that's almost an unstoppable play if you work at it, if you have it be part of your identity, the way the Eagles have it as part of their identity. So the Steelers can hate it, but they would be stupid if they didn't try to exploit it.
Absolutely. The other rule that didn't pass that I think got a lot of excitement out of people was the proposal to reseed teams in the playoffs by purely their records. So division winners still get in the playoffs, but as I think it was the Vikings that were the second place team in the NFC North with a 14-win season. They had to go on the road in the playoffs, and people felt like that was unfair. Unless I might have is it the Lions? I always mix that up. But point being, they want the better record team, regardless if they were second place in their division, to have the home game over division winners if the records, for the wild card team are better than the divisional round team. And that did not pass. And Ray, I'm all for it not passing. I'm sorry. And Mike Tomlin talked about this too. I think regionality is important to the NFL. It increases the importance of rivalries. Winning your division earns you a home playoff game, and it also kind of acknowledges that there can be strengths. There can be strengths in different parts of the league where certain divisions are just tougher than others at certain times of the year. So, what was your reaction when you saw that this didn't pass? Did you think this was a mistake?
No, I'm fine with it too, and I think there's a little bit of an uproar this year because I think there was a 14-win Vikings team had to go on the road, right? Well, in my mind, if you're good enough, you'll make a run to the Super Bowl. The Steelers were 11-5 in 2005. When they won 3 road playoff games and then they won Super Bowl 40. 11-5 in some years back in the day when they still had a 16-game schedule. 11-5 was the same record they had in 1992 when they were the number 1 seed in the NFL playoffs. So it just matters about how strong your conference is, how strong your division is. In my mind, like I said, about that 2005 Steelers team, if you're good enough, you'll go on a run. And if you're like the Vikings, you win 14 games. If you're not good enough, you're not going to make that run.
Exactly. I'm right with you. You win your division if you want to host a playoff game or get far enough in the playoffs that you meet another wild card team with a lesser record. It's that simple. But this has been another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Ray, thank you for joining us, and thank you all for joining us here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Reminder, you can always find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes, as well as daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back here Friday with Brian Batko right here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.